We'll start the meeting 7:02. This is the February 12th meeting of the Wenham FinCom. Present is Finn Sprague. It looks like I got Bob, we've got Jared, and also Jeff. All right, so with 3 members present, we have a quorum, so we can get going. So if I take a look at the agenda on there,
There's Jenna.
Oh, Dano's coming.
Yeah.
We'll wait a minute here. All right, looks like Dano has joined us, so we've got 4 members ready. So hey Dano, how's it going?
Hey, everybody.
Cheers. So let's see, I'm looking at the agenda that we've got out there, and has the call to order, and then has a public comment. I don't see any members of the public present, so I'm going to move past that one. So we've got 3 um, 3 discussions here. One is about the new school project. We've got the FY26 budget and the capital budget. And we spent almost all of the last couple of weeks on this first topic, the new Cutler School building. And so I'm hoping to give more time to these other budgets. And so, you know, given the motion that we issued last week, I think the last thing that I think we want to do is start to align on whether or not we think the deck for the Cutler School building project is in a position, in a condition that would be ready for release to the public. That's the kind of the only major thing on my mind, but maybe Jeff, I'm forgetting something that we need to cover here on this topic.
No, I think that's pretty much it. You've done your analysis, you took a vote, and now, as you and I talked about earlier, there's a little bit of, tweaking to the deck. The biggest difference I can think of is we did add a page on the tax impact into the PowerPoint, and I did actually just send a PDF version of that new page to everyone because I'm not sure it will show up really clear on the screen when we share it. And Gary Cheeseman is joining us in a moment.
Oh,
Jeff,
okay.
that PDF was non-printable on both my printers.
Huh.
They complained about.
Might have had like a font issue.
I don't know if it was a font issue. It was just sending the PDF to the printer.
Huh.
Mhm.
I will
Well,
take a look at that on my end and see if there's something I can do to make it work better.
The other thing is, what was our vote on the school proposal at the last meeting? Because I looked at your quickly at the warrant draft you sent out, and I thought we had one against.
That's a very draft warrant, so they recycle sort of prior year things and stuff. So it may actually say that there's a vote in there, but that's yet to be updated. I just got that shortly before the meeting started, so I can go through and look. But yeah, I mean, it will be clear our vote was 4-1.
Yeah, I think that's important. So, as I went through the deck again this afternoon, and I went through it with John McGrath from the Hamilton FinCom to see if he had any comments or concerns about it. As I read through it, I think Jeff hit it on the head. Is just the last couple of slides that I think need our attention. Slides 8, 9, and 10. I can throw those up on the screen, can't I? Because I think Jeff, you sent me the deck.
Yeah.
All right, hopefully you can see it, guys. No? I'll try again. Right. So in my mind, it's these 3 that are the last ones that I really need to see if there's any wordsmithing to happen here. Right. This one is to basically acknowledge that the as proposed school, opening doors in 2028 is showing us more expensive than the one school, right? But I don't have any language in here that is what I highlight and we highlight in slide 9 with the recommendation, which is the only reason it's less expensive is we've given this next alternative, the delay 7 years, every single advantage possible when it comes to interest rates, construction inflation, or cost or scope of the project. So I feel like not having something to that effect in slide 8 is the thing that's missing there. I don't know if you guys have any other thoughts on the language that's on this recommendation page, which I think will end up being the thing that maybe we agonize over a little bit more. And then after that, we can just go to slide 10, which is the new slide that Jeff put together that says, okay, now that we've brought all the residents together on through this path of how we did all this math, right? Come to a recommendation, and then we say, okay, and the net of the least expensive option, right, is this impact on your tax rate? I'll pause here before we move on.
Well, I like the recommendation slide.
All right, cool. Not hearing any other comments, so we can take a look
Well,
at
your
this slide.
question was, what should go on the previous slide? Is that
Right.
the question?
I think I'm trying to figure out. I want to kind of highlight the fact that we're using this 6% discount rate, right, in all these sensitivity analysis. That's the one we've got the box around, and it shows the delay as, being favorable financially, right? But that's not the whole story. The story can't end there, right? Which is why we highlight why we, even though it shows as less expensive to delay for another 7 years or so, we still don't recommend that to the
Right, and you're looking for language, something along the lines, well, this, is slightly more attractive. The recommendations page that follows
Mhm.
describes the many risks associated, many
Right.
benefits given and the risks associated with the
Mhm.
one school in 7 years option. So I think you need some, a few words. You can't put the whole thing on because you'll have too much text,
Mhm.
but enough to refer back to the next page.
Mhm.
And that comment that really doesn't just apply to the 6% discount rate. It applies generally to the alternative.
Right. If you have a higher discount rate than 7% than 6%, right, then you're going to see it that way all across the board. Okay. So I think that is the major thing that I think is missing from the deck here. Otherwise, I've gone through all these other slides and I think I've got what we all talked about last week. This is the new data, and so I'm going to make this a little bigger. Hopefully you guys can see it. All right, so Jeff, this was your work, so maybe it'd be a good idea for you to kind of walk us through.
Sure.
Okay.
So this is just a reworking of what I sent out, or maybe I don't know if I sent it out or presented it last week, but it just walks through the debt amortization for Wenham, and the impact to the average household, the median household, and then per 100,000. But what we've done is break it up so half the page sort of walks you through how did we get to, that we needed $92,486,000 of debt. Then how is that apportioned between Hamilton and Wenham? And then some information there about, what are the Wenham, total valuations, the average and the median single family homes. And underneath you'll see sort of throughout the stuff on the left-hand side here, there's some notations 1 through 4. Some of them are just simply, explaining where the information came from, emails from Eric or Vinny at the school. Number 3 talks about that allocation, which for FY26, we're looking at an operating assessment or operating apportionment of 65.92% to Hamilton and 34.08% 5% to Wenham. This was brought up last week, I think, by both Jared and Angus. So I may not have made it totally clear last week during the meeting, but in the regional agreement, which there have been a few different amendments to over the years, and instead of sort of replacing language, they kind of added to it each time. But where we stand now is essentially any debt that was issued after January 1st, 2000 is apportioned to the towns in the same manner as the operating assessment each year is calculated, which is essentially a 3-year rolling average of enrollment for each town. That is what the debt will be apportioned at. The sort of caveat to that is that the school committee, with the approval of the 2-member towns, and by that we mean an actual vote of the town at a town meeting to accept a change, the 2 towns could sort of debate about the apportionment. Would it make sense to memorialize a static apportionment for the debt over the 20-year term rather than having it vary from year to year? And that's a discussion perhaps we could have with our counterparts in Hamilton. To some degree, I feel like if you're Hamilton and you feel like Wenham's at a higher than the historical average apportionment, why would we want to lock in a different rate than that? But the reason they may want to is that the enrollment, and I've been working on some data the last 20 years of apportionments. It is very variable, and while we may be at 34.08 right now, we've dropped considerably lower than that, into the 30 and 32 range over time. So agreeing to make some sort of change to this specific debt allocation could be seen as sort of a hedging instrument to have a little certainty around what your share of this debt would be over the next 20 years instead of just having it be this sort of rolling average for the next 20 years, which can have pretty big fluctuations for each town in theory. So we wanted to spell that out here based on last week's discussions, and I'm certainly happy to update that with more detail, as folks would like. And then the final sort of, footnote here is, what we do whenever we do any of these sort of projected calculations to say, the best we can do is take what's the valuation in the town right now and what are the average and median single family home values now, and just assume that those stay static, for the period we are analyzing. And so we always throw language in there that, essentially says this will not be the experience of any individual homeowner over the next 20 years, because clearly, each person's individual property value is going to fluctuate and the total valuation of the town is going to fluctuate. So your percentage of the overall town valuation will change. This is just meant to be, if everything stayed static, here's how this looks to the average person. And the complicating factor here is that the debt service is a level principal as it's been presented to us. So that's what we're modeling out. And so that's where you're getting this, this descending for that average home. You're going from, almost 2,200 in year 1 to just over 1,200 in year 20. And I know Bob had suggested, I believe last week, potentially breaking this up and maybe showing it in five-year increments or something like that. I messed around with that a little bit. I found it was getting sort of confusing when I did want to show like what the average over 20 years was and what the total paid by, the average household would be. And if we were showing it in 5-year increments, that got a little convoluted. But I'm happy to, try to adjust this as folks see fit in terms of making it, more readable and more useful to the end user.
You might consider keeping what you have, but using 2 slides, because that would get your type up a little bit in size. It looks okay here, size-wise. I guess the footnote 4, I was wondering, would it be worth stating that, inflation would bring the tax rate impact down? So people know the direction.
So are you saying, Bob, that like if over 10 years the property values double, right? And a $1 million house becomes a $2 million house, right? Then the cost per $100,000 value would change, right? It would get cut in half as well. But really, the number that you see there at the bottom, $34 million and 34,000 and $30,000, like these numbers here, those are really not going to change, right?
No, what's going to change is the rate, because the rate's
Mhm.
going to come down even faster because
Mhm.
the base is going up with inflation and your payments, you have a payment structure that's locked in. That's all I'm saying, whether
Yeah.
we want to tell
Oh, wait,
people
you're
that.
saying the interest rate itself might
No,
fluctuate?
I'm saying that the tax rate impact
Hmm.
is going to go down because your debt service is as scheduled, but you're going to have an increased tax base. I'm
Mhm.
not saying you're paying anything less. I'm just saying that the rate is going to go down even faster with inflation than what's shown here.
Mhm. I understand.
I'm just suggesting that is that something we want to provide as information to people or not?
I, I'm concerned that we're forgetting about our audience and the purpose of this slide. We've been working on this for months, and the slide and we understand what we're trying to do, I think. But the slide as presented, I think, is a great slide for if you're a finance major. It doesn't. Remember, we're going to be sitting in the annual meeting or in the warrant hearing, and there are going to be people throwing their hands up in the air in frustration. We need, like, where in my suggestion, in lieu of all the red notes, which I fully understand why they're here, but just something in big print that says, if you do this school, you're going to pay, and your house is worth this, you're going to pay $2,000 more in year one based on the assumptions that we have, something like that, okay? Because otherwise, the purpose of the slide is going to get lost. I don't think anybody who's not been following this project is going to understand what this slide is telling them. Because I would hazard a guess that 90% of the citizens don't understand how the tax rate is set anyway.
So Jeff, what we could do is sort of the pattern that we've done in the rest of the deck, which basically would move all the comments you have in red there into sort of an appendix, right? And that would free up an area here, a quadrant of this box to say, here is
Exactly my suggestion. Yeah.
the net takeaway that the typical, right, typical household can expect to pay $2,000 to $2,200 incremental property tax in year one, which will reduce over time.
Yeah. And I guess I was almost hearing Jared as saying that almost this whole slide belongs in the appendix and it should be replaced with something that's almost like a chart that shows, whatever, start at $500,000 of valuation and go up to $1.5 million or, something with the associated tax rate at a bunch of, valuation spots in year
Well, I
one.
mean, I like it. That would be even clearer. But I think what Finn just said was where I was going.
Okay.
Is where the red stuff is, just something in big print that says, as these numbers show, under the assumption of a straight line mortgage, you're going to pay this much more in year one, and you're going to, please note these values may change in the event of, that a different financing option is elected by the town or something like that, or interest rates change.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let me work on a couple models of that. The only concern I have, something like this one pager, it sort of has everything and all the footnotes in one place. When you start breaking some of that stuff out, my only worry is that then you have slides that maybe don't have the footnotes or don't have extra information that suddenly are being circulated and not telling the whole story. And so someone has a little piece of the information and they use it in a certain way, pro or con on the project, and you say, yeah, but if you knew, this fact that's in the footnote, you know, that you would view this information differently. So let me take a couple cracks at, you know, doing what you're suggesting in the red area. And another idea I kind of have, and maybe send those out and get some group feedback on that.
Okay.
Sounds good to me. All right. I'm feeling like we're wrapping up. Like I said, I'm trying to keep our topic on, since we've been discussing this, as you said, Jared, for months. My goal is to get this deck to a position where the committee can basically approve it through some sort of motion and say it's ready for public release. I'm not sure off the top of my head when that's going to be. I think it has to be in February. I think I mentioned next week I'm going to be traveling without my laptop. So if I attended a meeting, I really wouldn't be able to look at stuff. But I think pretty soon afterwards, say that I think the week of the 24th, is kind of our last week to get a lot of our motions for the warrant book out the door. Any thoughts on that sort of timeline? Okay. So at the beginning of the meeting, we had public comment, and we didn't have anybody present at that moment, but I see that Gary Cheeseman, you've joined. So I wanted to see if there was any particular topic that you on the agenda that you wanted to cover, or we can come back to public comment at the end of the meeting. I'm not hearing anything from Gary.
Yeah, so
Oh, sorry.
no,
Okay.
I'm just observing. If you
Okay.
can hear me.
Okay. Well, then we'll just keep moving through. Any other commentary on the new school item on the agenda, or we can move on to the next one? All right. Not hearing any. I can pass the ball back to you, Jeff, and we can go on to the next one, which I think is the operating budget.
Sure. So let me switch that over in a second. So, all right. So I don't know if folks had a chance to look at. I sent around a link to the capital budget and also a sort of revamped town operating budget spreadsheet, and I wasn't sure if folks had a chance to look at that, if they had any particular questions or areas they wanted to sort of ask questions on relative to various departments or things like that. I wasn't sure what the best way to approach this was. I wasn't sure. I'm assuming folks don't want to walk through each department, line by line, but maybe there's some areas folks were interested in focusing on or asking some questions.
So what do you have on the screen here? I seem to recall that you had one that showed recent actuals and budgeted amounts for at the departmental level.
Yeah, and I think what I have here is what we reworked is this shows the actuals, and I've just got my finance department up as an example here. So I've got FY 23 and 24 actuals, the 25 budget, and then that we're in right now, and the 26 budget that's been proposed. And then what we've done is, this column here shows the increase over the budget season we're in. So from 25 to 26, here's the percentage increase. And next to it is what the dollar increase is, 25 versus 26. But over here, these are the columns that, I worked with Bob a little bit on these sort of targets. If you took your FY 23 actual expenditures in the departments and you extrapolated those out for the actual CPI, which was, the actual 2-year CPI was 11.97 for the 2 years, so the FY 24, and then the 3-year actual CPI is 17.91%. And so what Bob had sort of turned me onto here was, if you just took what you really spent and you went by CPI, where would you be now? And, how do you compare relative to those numbers? And so one of the limitations we have that we're going to need to work to fix in our general ledger is that we've never tracked actual line item wages very well in the actual GL budget. So what you see here is you have, the budget for 25 and the budget for 26. We have breakdowns of, the individual line items, the treasurer collector or me or the assistants. But for prior year history, wages are just lumped in together. So it gets a little, looks a little confusing here, but sort of what I was doing is saying, okay, well, if I were to sum up those three, those things, so all my 23 targets with what I really spent in 23, what would I have? And what I see is I'm about $27,000 too high based on my 23 target. And what I've done here is I've made a note to say, well, there's a sort of a reason for that, because in 23, the town made a decision to basically turn the assistant town accountant position into a full FTE. So that went up by $20,000-$30,000 in that year, and that essentially accounts for why why there's a variance. When we move to FY24, we're probably a little bit under. We're under by about $19,000. Now, of course, we didn't. The inflation over that period was 12%. We didn't raise our wages by 12%, during that time frame. So, that wasn't our COLA, internally. So I would expect that we were under those targets. But the way I've been approaching the budget is to go look at these target numbers to try to identify places where, where can we maybe trim that budget down because it's over a target, as a first line. It doesn't mean if it's not over target, you couldn't make an adjustment there. It was just sort of a filter to look at, where's a good place to start, to look at places where you might want to make some cuts.
So if I can
Jeff,
just
just
make
to-
sure I understand this,
Yeah,
is that you took column E, which is actuals in 2023, and you said the
Yeah.
inflation rate over 3 years was about 17 or some odd percent.
it's almost 18%. Yeah,
And that gives you column N, right?
correct.
And that if you do 24, you add 11%, you get column O. And then you're saying, hey, how are we doing in 2026 versus these inflation adjusted past actuals? Is that
Exactly.
okay?
And it looks a little choppy because I threw the targets off to the side. So when I print this, you can see everything through the notes, and we can fit it on a sort of a printable page. But yeah, you just followed it through. You go over to column N or column O to figure out what the targets are, and then you determine if you're over or under.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, maybe it's, I changed it up a little bit, and maybe it isn't helpful, but as I talked through it with Bob, I thought it was a sort of a helpful way to look at it and look for ways to find places where you could make a pretty straightforward argument to a department, that it would seem reasonable that if you've outpaced inflation for, and I think the 2 years is a good way to look at it, because if you're outpacing inflation for both FY23 and FY24, it would seem to me to indicate more of a reason to, perhaps investigate that more, versus, if you are outperforming both years, that's hopefully more of a positive sign. And if you're sort of a mix, one's within range and one's not, again, probably worth looking at more.
So Jeff, obviously the big driver is inflation here. Did you explain, maybe I missed it, on what you're using for inflation? I know you said 17%, but there's 70 different measures of inflation. Which one are we using?
Yeah, and actually, I might even let Bob weigh in. So I'm trying to see if Bob had pulled these COLA numbers. Bob, I don't know if you want to weigh in on where you actually pulled those numbers from or what you used.
Well, those ones are the ones that we pull for the first half of the year for what I do for someone else pulls them, but do for the New England diocese, and it's the New England cost of living adjustment. So that's where they came from. They're similar to the national CPI, which, but the intent here was that, for if you ignore the last few years, inflation has been in a fairly narrow band, so that things kind of, adjusted naturally. And the reason for looking back over multiple years is there are a lot of things going on that don't immediately track inflation. You've got contracts that, get renegotiated a couple of years later. And that was the reason for looking at, at a multi-year look back over this period where inflation jumped dramatically. Uh, I would add, the other thing is you can see people who have good trends like trash collection, which doesn't actually bode too well since our trash costs are likely to go up very much in the forthcoming contract. So, you've got to look at things and, apply some judgment as to what's happening there.
Yeah, and I just pulled up trash. That's a great point. I mean, the contract we have with Casella, in particular, which is the folks who actually pick up the trash, we are locked in a longer term contract that's at a much lower COLA that's in the contract, which is, what almost all the towns around are at the tail end. Either, they, in the last year or two, they've had to renegotiate, or they're about to, like we are, in the next year or two. So we'll see a pretty significant change. I know just on the Wheelabrator, which is the actual folks who take the trash, we pay them a tipping fee per ton. And that, is probably based on the proposal we received for July 1, 2025. We're looking at probably a 12% increase there. The good news is that that's a much smaller part of the overall budget. So it's a big percentage number, but a smaller, dollar number. It will be a much bigger deal when we redo the Casella contract, which is, a $400,000+ a year contract.
Okay, thanks for explaining where that came from.
So
Just
maybe,
a question for procedure tonight, Finn. Are we
Mhm.
trying to get to a vote on this, or are we trying to just get our heads around it better than we have, since we haven't paid as much attention and we've been focused on the school?
I think that's the latter is more likely. I want everybody to be comfortable with this. I think we have to come to a vote by the end of the month, but I don't think we need to go to a vote today.
Okay.
Same with the capital budget, Dano, too. So, Jeff, is there a way that you could do give us an overview here at the departmental level rather than the line item within the department?
Yeah, let me kind of give you so here is your and we've got a couple different ways we've built it out here. So one is what we show by function. Um and another is, then we would have like by department. But generally speaking, what we're looking at here, we for the most part told departments to essentially level fund, and not just, a lot of times we would say level fund except for contractual obligations. This year we sort of, with your original guideline, and really try to come in closer to 1.5%, something like that. We told departments to try to, if you had increases, come in, as close to a zero increase as you could. And I think, for the most part, if you look here, I mean, general government is coming in, slightly under the prior year, as is public safety. Education, of course, is a bit of an outlier there.
Jeff, sorry, I know you're trying to do the percentage over there only because I beat my head against the wall on this before.
Yeah.
Because it's pivot table, you have to actually type in the cell name. So you have to say equals.
Yeah, I realized as soon as I did it, I was like, oh, I have to actually go in and do each one.
But if you just do the first one, you can still copy it down. You just have to manually do the first one. Equals
Yeah, the
C whatever divided by D whatever.
Yeah, and then it should work. Yeah.
All right. So while you're doing that math, Jeff, I'm just gonna kind of look at what I'm seeing here, right? So basically we're saying that column F, whenever you have a negative value there, we're actually having a reduction versus the spend in the prior budget. If it's a
Yeah.
positive number, we have a material increase. So the big numbers, right, that come to mind are the education, the employee benefit, and the FY26 reserve.
Right, which we have in the reserve this year is that we have 3 contracts open. We are very close, I think, on a tentative agreement on one of the 3 contracts. And hopefully, we're getting closer to resolving the other 2 as well. But for right now, we've set this reserve aside as a way to account for it, because we can't actually increase the actual departmental budgets yet because we don't, know what's going to go in there. So we're just holding this reserve. The hope is that, we won't exhaust the entire 265. But yeah, I mean, to your point about obviously the big one, education is coming at 5.6% there. That's the big one. Partially that's the Hamilton Wenham School District and their increase, but it's also over at the Voc, we've added 2 students. So, just quick ballpark math, at 20 something thousand a student, with a couple extra students, you're looking at, $40,000-$50,000 more there. So it's not just the local school.
So our total's 4.79% increase. Can you this is me being ignorant, but our 2.5% threshold, how close are we to that, or how far over are we vis-a-vis that?
Well, so if we come back here, you've got your 2.5, but you've also got the 150,000 of new growth, that allows you, to absorb some extra expenses. And then you also have, it looks like we're able to, and this number could change, but I've been able to assume our revenue, our local receipts revenue will go up about $150,000. As well. And so those 2 things are what actually allow you to be under, and I know this is different, not completely what you're asking, Dano, but this is why, when people say there's a Prop 2.5, how are we going up 4.79%? And that's why, as this 150 and this 158 are allowing you extra sort of leeway.
We're under by
absorb that.
$3,500.
As of right now, yeah, I still think, I can tweak this number a little bit, and then we can also tweak expenses. But this is where we stand right now, is, relative to the levy limit is 3,500 under.
Jeff, could you
But we're nowhere near
review
flat.
how the levy limit is calculated?
Hold on one second, Bob. Dano, I think, was saying something right there at
keep
the
going.
end.
Go ahead.
Okay. So the levy limit is calculated. There's a couple components to it. So each year, you calculate a brand new levy limit, and that levy limit is based on the prior year plus the 2.5% growth of that levy limit each year. And then you have the new growth component. And then you also have debt exclusions. So what's interesting, if you look here, is that the debt exclusions are actually going down, because the debt exclusions, they allow you to be up and over the Prop 2.5 number, because your town at some point has voted to allow the town to take action that would push it over with debt service, the annual 2.5 levy limit. But as those debt payments begin to wind down on certain debt instruments, as they are here in Wenham, you can see here the exempt debt payments we made last year were $932,000 essentially. This year that's dropped to $887,000. So we don't just, that money disappears in terms of the levy limit. We don't, get to absorb that, whatever, $50,000, $60,000 into other spending. That's the beauty of the debt, the debt override, is that it goes away. An operational override continues forever. Once you set that Prop 2.5 limit, it continues unless you actually vote what's called an underride. But the debt, actually drops. The debt payments above and the expenses have dropped as well. But
Is that flow through in your model if you just typed in 500,000 there instead of 886?
It would. Well, this is actually set to. This number is tied to, if I actually, the way it's works.
I just wondered, just right on the bottom right corner, I wonder if it would change to 4.97, the 2.88.
Okay, so if I'm just going to go, so we're going to do what, like minus 388, I think.
Sure. So if that number's smaller, you're better off. You're under you're farther under your 2.5%. So got it. I just want to make sure I was understanding that right. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, no, what that just did.
Go
So
in the
what
opposite
this did,
direction.
Yeah, this just did actually is it, yeah, it put us way over the override, the levy limit. And the reason is I lowered this number, but this number is actually tied to, if I go here. The debt service. So the way the debt service basically works out is the red highlighted numbers in our debt service, those are actually not exempt. When we voted those debt instruments at town meeting years ago, we did not do a debt exclusion override. So these numbers have to be absorbed under the tax rate, but the rest of the debt, and then actually, and that's not even going to be enough of it.
That's okay. I don't want to get us derailed. Let's go on.
But yeah, so anyway, what basically, what should be happening is in lockstep. If I lowered this by 300,000, this expense up here would have lowered by 300,000 as well. And actually, we can do that actually, I should see just real quick what I did exactly. 388, right? Yeah, so this would get you now. This gets you back. You're still at the this is still your 110, but now the expenses and the debt exclusion are matching up again. So you're still 3,500 under the levy limit. It's just that the levy limit has dropped quite a bit because you don't have that extra debt exclusion. So let me just remember to get rid of all this now. And that would be very prominent if we were to pass the Cutler debt, because the Cutler debt is decreasing each year quite a bit because of the level principal payments. It would be similar. This number would be dropping year over year. It would be a huge number in year one, and it would begin to drop by 100,000 plus each year based on the level principal.
So we should go back to the department schedule, right? I took us away from that. I apologize.
Okay. Yeah. So we were looking at by function. And so, yeah, I think this is the first basic look is, we're trying, and I'll be the first to say that this is budget over budget. We're going down. So, you're still, up from what you actually spent in 24.
Can you do that percentage real quick on what we are versus 24? So we're up 14%. The 26 budget is 14% over the 24 actuals. Is that what you did in that column, M?
I believe that is correct. Yes. No, yeah, 24 actuals. Exactly. Yep. And so now one of the things that I can tell you right off the bat is within general government in FY24, we have 120, we start each year with $125,000 of finance committee reserve. And the way finance committee reserve works is we don't actually spend it in that year. We transfer it to other budgets. So in any year, when you look at your actuals, you didn't spend any money for FinCom reserve on that line item. But but for this year, I still have to build that in. So it looks like, you're up 125 over zero. So that's like something like FinCom reserve it's almost like a placeholder. I mean, you're putting it in there for the case of emergency. You may spend it and you may not, but you need to have that in there because you have things like this year.
So wait, it's in actuals, but it's not in budget?
It's in budget, but it ends up not being an actual. So if I looked at what
if you removed it from the budget line, it would be an apples to apples comparison.
Yeah.
So we should,
yeah.
I don't know if you can do that, subtract 125,000 from the 2,048,000, but
yeah, and I think I actually have a document I've done in another spreadsheet where I've tried to walk through those reconciliations. But yeah, essentially, if you were to, if I went here,
I get it. So, but it's employee benefits like normal and schools and insurance, so OPEB.
Yeah, and some of these can be deceiving, Dana, right? Because I mean, OPEB's 10%, but it's, you know, it's really $10,000. So it's, you know, the
Minor.
10% on OPEB is not nearly as impactful as 5.61% on school.
Yeah. Yeah, can you do the total dollars for 2026 versus 2024 actuals?
Yeah, so you do here. It's like, yeah, and that, yeah, it seems to about make sense. 25.6-ish, 22.4. Which, and just let's just prove out plus. Yeah, so that does prove back out. So it's about, yeah, it's about 3. And that would, yeah, because that's 24, you know, so this, because the one education is one line or one function where the numbers are then actual is always the same as budget, because it's, you know, we agree to a budget with the school, and then they bill us that exact amount for the year, versus most other budget items are, you know, they're yet to be seen, and we might budget a, you know, a certain amount for expenses in general government that we may or may not spend them, but this, so this looks like we're, you know, from FY24 actual to proposed FY26, we're up 3.2 million, and this looks like roughly 1.6 million of that is on the school, or these are my percentages. So essentially it's half, and then, you know, I think the bigger, you know, then the rest is probably, the big ones are probably employee benefits. That's actually not, that's up 500,000, it looks like, roughly. What other big tickets do we have? And that's 350. That's 200. That's 150. So we could go through each and one of those and see what makes up that difference. But you know, clearly the big drivers are employee benefits and education for sure. And then this is the 265 is obviously that placeholder didn't exist before, so that's another, you know, another 265 is a decent part of the increase as well. So let's see if I can.
I know we've talked about this before, and are we contractually obligated to cover certain levels of benefits, right? We couldn't redefine benefits. It's outside of the contract negotiation, I assume.
It gets considered part, you know, it can be considered a change in working conditions that would allow them to sort of reopen the contract. If we agreed to a contract and then we suddenly the next year said, oh, you know what, you're now paying 60% of your health insurance, the unions would certainly file some kind of claim and say, well, wait a minute, that changes everything.
So it is negotiated as part of the contract.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, even, you know, it's mentioned as part of the process, right? I mean, you're all, you know, as you're trying to negotiate all the other parts and pieces, you're always kind of throwing in there, well, don't forget, you know, this is worth X, you know, to you. These benefits are worth X to you. So it's part of the conversation. It's not always completely locked into the agreement. But it is part of the personnel rules and regulations too, is that we, you know, we cover X% as a town and you cover X% as an employee. But, you know, I think as we talk about longer term discussions, that's going to have to be, you know, something that we're going to have to evaluate, because it's, you know, it's one of the faster growing parts of our budget. And if we're covering the majority of it, we've got to figure out a way to address that. You know, and even in the last 20 years, I know in 27 or 2007, maybe 2006, um, I know the Manchester Essex School District was still at a 90-10 split on health insurance. Um, and because we were at a 75-25 split in Essex, that was, we were able to use that as leverage to begin working the district towards, something closer to that 75-25 split. And a
What are
lot of
we?
times I believe we're 75-25. So, and what I've seen done in the past is, sometimes it will be a sort of like a grandfather type situation. So you say, these people still stay at 75-25, but all new folks, it's not as big in the town as, the schools, you tend to see it more because they have such large numbers of people on the insurance that you just say, all new teachers are now, 70-30 or, some other thing. But the unions will usually agree to as long as you keep me at this, this level, I'm fine with the new person, paying more.
Aren't we all?
Yeah.
That's why we are where we're at.
Yeah. And the pension side of things, there's two sides to pension. So pension at the school level, all teacher pensions are through the Mass Teachers Retirement System, and actually aren't paid at the town level. That's paid, it's handled sort of at the state level. So all employees at the town level, that pension we pay into the Essex Regional Retirement System. But the teachers are handled differently. But all of that is still dictated, through state, mass general laws in terms of, we can't say, we'd be willing to offer, these pension benefits versus, something different in Hamilton. We'd need to work with over time, pension reform with, local state reps and senators and things like that. Deval Patrick did, the last sort of material pension reform, probably, 8-10 years ago now, where they changed a lot of the parameters, around, what people's contribution rates are, and also, sort of how your pension is calculated. So someone like me who's only been working in this space for, 6 or 7 years, my pension calculation will be much different than someone who's been doing this for 20 years. I will have a much less lucrative pension than if I started, 10 or 15 years earlier, based on the pension reform rules.
Jeff, do you think it would be desirable at some point to talk a little bit about the work that's being done with the comparables in terms of ranking and also, the
I
work
haven't got I haven't got that completely squared up, and so I was thinking it might be something that I finished up and ran by you one last time and sent out to the group just because we've had a couple other things crop up, this last week or so. Um, so yeah, I didn't want to have another night where I'm putting something up that I didn't have completely ready to go. But if you have something that you felt like you were ready to talk about, I know you've sent some of the library stuff and things like that. If you want, I can pull something up, and if you want to walk through it, but I had sort of been thinking of, pushing that off a little bit.
Well, I had a couple of thoughts that maybe are worth verbal commentary without graphs. I mean,
Okay.
basically, the thing that Jeff and I have been looking at is how we compare to our comparables when you do a scatter diagram of expenses by department, total, etc., against the median household income in the community. And, that data generally suggests that the more affluent the community, the more they spend per capita on whatever. And the thing that particularly interested me is there's a fairly strong correlation at R squared of 67% for education. It's the highest one in the things I've looked at. So I think that might be something that we should be thinking about as we consider what changes might be appropriate, because it's not consistent across the different departments. The thing that, as I say, stands out is education culture, and on the other hand, the DPW looks right now like it's less driven by median household income. So I just wanted to share that to the extent it might be useful to us going forward.
Yeah, I think, yeah, like I said, I'd hate to, I mean, I feel like the last time, one of our last meetings, I put up some stuff that I didn't have completely ready and it
I'm
wasn't as
not asking
helpful.
you to put it up. I just, I think
Yeah,
maybe just particularly because I mentioned the education because that thing is coming up. That one, you know, people might want to know that we spend more on education because the median household income is much higher than a lot of our comparables.
Did
We
did
do the
any of
same
you
thing for
guys
libraries too.
one of this is a little bit of a tangent, but it goes with what you just said, Bob. There was an email that I got from Eric Tracy. I think everybody did. It had these reports called the DESE reports that compares our town and all the other towns to each other in terms of kind of education outcomes, the cost of education, and
Mhm.
accountability. Um, I I looked at that and there was a couple of things I pulled away from that, which was that, um, and I wish I had the number. I don't think I still have the numbers on my screen, but basically it suggested that the Hamilton Wenham's spend per capita. Oh, yeah, I think I do still have it up here. Um, per capita for uh, for Wenham was basically more expensive than the Massachusetts average, right? And I think I put this up on the screen. Where is it? Here.
you want me to switch over to you or?
Yeah, let me just push. I gotta click these buttons, I think. All right, and this I thought was a little bit the graph. Whoever designed this graph has got some sort of programming error because it looks like we went from getting 0% or 4% of education from federal funds to zero, but it's actually $100 more. So the investment per student went from $20,000 to $21,000 or 22. So call that about $1,500 increase from 22 to 23. But there was basically a $1,500 increase for the average student as well here. So you go from 22 to 23. But our cost, right, our total cost of call it $22,000 dollars per student is just a little bit higher than the Massachusetts average, which I thought was different than what I was assuming, right? Um, and the other thing that I picked up with, I don't know if you guys, I went to or I attended virtually the Hamilton Wenham um, meeting, or sorry, the Hamilton Select Board meeting last week, and John McGrath from the Hamilton FinCom chair basically stood up and said that he is trying to do a bunch of math that suggests the incremental cost for one more student in our school district is somewhere around $13,000, right? That this is not a number that increases $22,000 for every, for one more student, but something lower than that. But those are the numbers that I pulled out of this just on the finances, and you can go down into into a Power BI report, right? And really try to figure out which ones are your comparable towns, right? And you can just look at it across a ton of different things. But my big takeaway was pretty comparable with these supposed Massachusetts averages.
Can you go back to that Power BI for a second and look at Hamilton Wenham total? I thought it said 23,000.
Yeah, I think this has to do with the total expenditures has something to do with like other expenses that are not included, right? So I think that total number of 21,000 doesn't include every single one of these rows. I think it excludes something here, right? So here's Hamilton Wenham 23.7, right? And you can see that say Concord with is 26, Manchester is 25, Marblehead, Newburyport a little bit lower, Topsfield a lot lower. Well, these students, I was trying to take a look at these and look at the size of the districts, right? So Hamilton with 1,600 almost 1,700 students doesn't fit perfectly with any of these. But you might say it's, it's more like these middle four than, 2,600 in Marblehead, or, Beverly is, I think, 4,400 students. So those numbers are, maybe not comparable.
What are
Uh,
what can you scroll to the far right? What are Beverly's costs?
18.5.
Interesting.
The other interesting thing about the comparables is that of our comparable group, I think it's only 3 or 4 actually provide schooling within the town for pre-kindergarten to 12. That there's a real spread of what people do. Some people offer pre-kindergarten to 5, 6, or 8th grade. Then there are the people, like we're classified as a non-operator because we're in a regional school district. So there's a real mishmash when you look at our comparables as to what's going into their cost of education.
Mhm.
They're either whether they're paying it directly in town or they're part of a consortium, et cetera.
Right.
Yeah, and actually to that point, Bob, Topsfield on the bottom of the screen there, that Topsfield number, they're part of the Masco School District, but that Topsfield number is basically their K or pre-K through 5 because they educate locally for elementary, and then kids move up to the regionalized Masco for 6 through 12. So that Topsfield number doesn't reflect their full education cost. They're also in the Masco district as well. It's MASCO. I think there's one S. Fin. There you go. Masconomet.
Oh, I didn't know what that was. I was
Yeah.
like, that sounds like a town I've never heard of. Only 1,500?
I think you
Yeah,
mentioned
but realize
school
that's only 6 through 8 through 12.
Okay.
What's
So
the
like,
total
the
on that? If you go to the right, Finn,
Sorry?
can you
Go to the
go to the
right.
right on that? 25. Interesting.
Yeah, they're on the more expensive side.
I wonder, these numbers here do they include the debt service on buildings? Or is this just operating? I think
Is
it's,
it one of the
Believe
columns?
it's operating.
so it basically, if you have some of these towns that are going through a pinch point like Hamilton Wenham is on investment, it's not, or the timing of, having done this 10 years ago and not need to do it for another 30 um, is not reflected here. This is really just the operating expenses to run the school.
But actually, that's an interesting point, Finn, because I'm looking at Manchester Essex at 25,000, and we've got a $50 million build we just did in Manchester, which I'm wondering if that is part of what would be driving that up. I thought it was just operating costs, but
I'm just looking to see if there's anything besides operations and maintenance.
and I think
There's,
that's much more like just regular day to day.
yeah.
I can look at that though, because that's an interesting question. I mean, that will obviously skew. If that's the case, our number would go up, uh, you know, quite dramatically if the Cutler project were to move forward, and I don't think it will, because it would make it hard to evaluate from school to school because someone who's in the middle of a debt service versus someone who's not, could look look like their numbers were much better, but it was really just a question of timing in terms of capital improvements.
Hmm.
Yeah, I know we're jumping around a bit. I don't know. I had another set of questions just on the tax rate tab that you put together,
Yeah,
Jeff.
Okay.
so the only other thing so I just thought that was particularly interesting, and I put together an email that I haven't set to Eric, just trying to figure out why um, this accountability thing, which basically seems to have to do with, how well kids graduate and if they're attending classes and stuff like that. There are a few zeros in here that don't make sense to me, where we're getting dinged because this is saying that, you know, um, basically we're getting 0 out of 4 for graduation rate, which didn't make sense to me. So those are things that maybe I'll CC you on it, Jeff, and if anything comes to it, we'll come back to the group with
Yeah.
something.
Wow.
Jeff, I was just looking at your tax rate tab, and the trend over time, and then as we're talking about the capital budget too. Oh, sorry, on the far right, you had your 10-year tab shows levy increasing over time and estimates for new growth, et cetera, and you come up with whatever the tax rate's going to be, or median
Yeah.
family tax implications. How do we think about the capital expenditure in here? Or
So
is
there's,
it implicitly included because
mean,
there's
it's
some
sort
debt
of,
service implied, or?
yeah, I mean, what we've really done is the big ticket item, the Cutler debt has been built in here. Underneath town operating budget up here in the top, and even on the school side, there's debt that's rolling off both the town and the Hamilton Wenham School District, and a small amount off the Essex North Shore. I didn't get too granular with moving that on and off. I've just sort of assumed that, this is the big ticket item. Yes, there could be some capital, that's in there. I mean, the big things that are on the
I'm
horizon
just
for
thinking you
us.
got 14 million in the total CapEx in the next 5 years on the PowerPoint you sent over.
Yeah, but one of those is $10 million for a DPW building that's really sort of, it's on the last year of the 5-year number, just to sort of have it there as a placeholder of, it's not necessarily that we need a DPW building in 5 years. It's just to have it as, that leaves it in the capital projection as something we're going to need at some point.
And then okay, so that explains that. That helps. And then where would the school's other CapEx, like whatever millions of dollars for roof and stuff like that, fit into the school budget, I guess? So that's implied also
I
in
mean,
the
yeah, I
Hamilton
think,
Wenham.
yeah, I mean, we certainly could. I mean, as we got more, good data on that. I mean, I know they've applied to the MSBA for reimbursement on the high school roof, is what I think you're talking about there, and so we don't completely know what that amount would be, but if as time progresses and we get a more definitive, that's going to cost us, let's just call it 3 million out of pocket, and that means it's going to cost Wenham $1 million. We could build that in. I mean, if we did that over a 10-year debt instrument, we could back into, what that
Well, I
might
guess
be.
I'm just philosophically more just high level. I'm asking if we should assume there's a base level of debt service built in here already. Like you said, certain stuff rolls on, certain stuff rolls off. So this is a decent estimate, assuming ongoing
Yeah, I mean,
CapEx and whatever else.
yeah, I would say I feel like, I mean, like this 100, if I go back to the debt page here, this 180 is rolling off soon. That's a big payment. The fire truck, that's 50,000, this is, so yeah, there, you've got 350 grand of debt, which really this 10-year is just sort of saying that's going to keep rolling. So I think, I don't think there's a material amount missing in there.
350,000 of debt a year covers how much was in that CapEx that's going toward.
Well, most of the CapEx is covered with free cash. So, I mean,
I guess
I'd have
that's the
to,
other part. Okay, yeah.
I'm trying to think of I mean, Town Hall was a big project, 20, or 18, 19 years ago now. Trying to think of what other ones are big.
I'm just trying to guess if you're understating or overstating.
Yeah, I mean, we could certainly, I mean, we could,
But it sounds like it's pretty.
yeah, we could. I mean, I guess that I mean, maybe we could stress test it a little bit too and say like, well, what does it look like if we assume there's going to be an extra 100,000 a year in CapEx or something like that to see how much it changes it. But I think generally speaking, at a high level, it lays out to you where this trend is headed. And what your tax bill, could it be that average, home at the end, instead of being 23,147, maybe it's 23,358 or something. Maybe it will be, but I think just as a general trend, it gives people the direction, which is, I think part of what we want to show is, we want you to, we don't want you to just focus on what you're paying in year one. We want you to understand, where you're going to be in 10 years or something like that.
To me, this is the message that we got to get across. I mean, to Jared's point about the slide on the school, this is the one line on the overall. The one line on the school is, if your house is worth this, then you're going to be paying this much in taxes incrementally in year one. Our one line is this: if
Yeah.
your house is worth this with everything included, you're going to be paying whatever in 5 years from now.
Yeah. So yeah, so in that case, right now, and this is sort of your bill as the FY26 budget is projected right this second. And this is adding the debt payment over the, onto that, what that would look like. So this is, year one, you're looking, instead of having a 16.4, you're looking at 18.6 essentially. And then, to your point, it carries over, that all grows, that all compounds, or I shouldn't say that, the debt, the Cutler debt actually is descending, but your other payments are, increasing at whatever that might be, 2.5 to 4% a year or something like that.
Cool, thank you.
Yep. So Finn, getting back to your sort of, can I give you a high level this? So now we've sort of looked at, as I was building it out with Dano on the side there, if we look at what we're projecting our budget to be for FY26 versus what we actually spent in FY24, here's where we're at in terms of a dollar difference. And so you can see where the big ticket items are, and they're kind of where you thought they would be. They're in employee benefits, they're in education. That FY26 salary contract reserve is a big ticket item, obviously. The last line item for water, that doesn't impact tax rate. That's a water utility bill issue there. But it does, we do include water in our operating budget article here, and it's basically offset by, if I say that, the water budget is going to be 598,000 in FY26, I'm assuming that $598,000 of revenue is coming into the tax picture to offset that. So it's, the net effect is neutral. And then there's a page here that also, and, then breaks out, that was the function, the general government, all those. And then here we get into what are we looking at for the changes for each individual department. And maybe I can resubmit this and recirculate this, but add, some of this data we were just working on. What are the dollar and percentage increases for, over FY24, over FY25, just to give people a little more data there. I tend to struggle with trying to make it so it can be, kind of looked at in one page, but, there is just, an awful lot of data to look at. You can look at it multiple ways. And,
This is
certainly
super helpful. This is outstanding breakout, I think, and lots of flexibility to look at it a million ways. So I think it's great.
But yeah, so that's kind of my high level. I mean, I can, if you think it's helpful, I could type up a quick email that gives you, I think I already kind of had one going that gives you my a little bit more departmental level. I think there's certainly room you could squeeze here and there, but I think generally your departments are trying to, adhere to your original, sort of, mantra of staying in the, the 1.5 range or whatever it was. And it's just mainly we're handcuffed by, the bigger items that are the big drivers, just like they are in every single town, with the employee benefits and the education, and those type of things. We do have a discussion we can have, as a FinCom is, there is about $2 million, a little over 2 million, 2,071,000 of free cash. The proposed capital, which we'll be talking about shortly, is about 1.3 million, I think. So certainly there's, $600,000-700,000 of funds that, much like last year, we can look at putting into stabilization or OPEB. We could entertain using some money to reduce the tax rate.
Can you tell me, Jeff, did the town adopt the recommended sort of guidance ranges in those?
Those aren't fully adopted. I know on our end, we had some more dialogue to have on that, and I know we had some discussions on, whether we should have ranges or specific targets, 5% instead of 4 to 6%, that type of thing. But I think generally speaking, they're not fully approved yet, but I think generally speaking, we all sort of agree that they're generally close, so that, yeah, we would still be trying to, that idea of having, at least 1% of free cash left after, the 1 or 2% of free cash left after what we use at town meeting and those type of things, and the same, the targets for, we'd like stabilization to be, 5 to 7% of operating budget, those type of things. So I think,
Perhaps it would be a good idea for you to kind of show us what would it look like if we tried to get this budget in compliance with those guidances, right? So you have that $2.2 million, of which 1.3 we're going to talk about in a bit on some capital projects, right? Like what would that proposed policy kind of like, would it reserve some of those
yeah.
funds and say, hey, you got to send 400 of this over to one bucket or another?
Yeah, and I think that was kind of my next thing for sort of next week is to, as we tighten up the budget and then you then have a handle on what you think your operating budget is, then you say, okay, well, we said we wanted 5 to 7% of that number to be in stabilization, and we're currently at 5.2%. So I think we're good. Or, geez, we're now at 4.6%. Do we want to make an additional contribution? I know last year we had a lot of talk around, generally speaking, as a group, I think we liked, locking up the funds. We would rather have $200,000 in stabilization that is a little bit more rigid in terms of how you can spend it versus free cash that's a little bit more easily accessible. But yeah, I can have those ready for sort of next time to talk about those. We certainly have less money than last year to play with, and we have, I think, a little bit more capital than we had last year. So,
Can you
but we
also send around, do you also send around the 5% reduction study?
we did, and I let me see if I've got. I mean, I think I briefly touched on this a week or
You
two
touched
ago.
on it, but yeah, I didn't know if I couldn't find it in any of the emails if you'd sent it.
Yeah, it's actually, I just built it into this model.
Okay.
So it'll be in here now. I mean, these are the ones we have so far. Folks that could, they thought they could find another 162,000 or so. I'm still trying to chase down some people to find some other numbers. But this is what I presented to you a couple weeks ago. So this is the starting level. And yeah, and we can certainly push back on folks. And certainly if we have our own ideas too of where we think that there's some overage. Clearly there's overage in the budget because we're returning, departments are returning money, which is what's helping us derive free cash.
I don't think that's available in the one you sent us. Maybe you
No,
can
I
put
just
that in
added
there.
this today.
Okay,
It was
got
in a
it.
different spreadsheet. So I was like, I want to have it in the model that goes out to you folks this time around.
Okay, cool.
Um,
I got a hard stop at 8:30 personally. I know we're short on people on the group here tonight, so
okay.
I don't know
Could we-
if that matters, Finn, or not, but I got to jump at 8:30.
All right.
Sure. I don't think it'll take us out of a quorum, but I think we can try to address
Can
the
we,
next item on the budget on the agenda.
yeah, just try to run through at a high level these
Can we
capitals
just see
real
if there's
quick?
any questions with people who've looked at it already, or if they haven't? I had one question. I looked at it, but I tend to pick on the police for whatever reason. I'm a fan of law enforcement and have colleagues who are law enforcement, but I don't know why. So anyway, but if we just blew up the whole concept of the Durangos, at $75,000 a pop and said, hey guys, what's the cheapest, front wheel drive or all wheel drive police capable vehicle out there? Some Nissan sedan at $25,000 and soup it up to be police and it's $50,000. Like, what if we just rebooted our fleet to a totally cheaper version?
Yeah, and David actually asked a very similar question. How come we don't see a lot of Hondas or that kind of thing? Generally speaking, it was the big three auto guys that made the police packages. And actually, we had been on the Durangos, and now this year, what they're proposing is actually this Ford Interceptor, which is an SUV that's I would guess it's sort of a Ford Explorer type body type, I would say. But that's about the only all-wheel drive mini or mid-size SUV that
Do
they
we need
make
an
now.
SUV? We can be a sedan.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe that is a question for, I've seen a couple of times where we have the two Tahoes that drive past my window at the same time. And I think, can we really possibly need two Tahoes? That's a big, huge, not rather nimble vehicle. So I can, push the chief on, because yeah, even the chief and the deputy both, I mean, the chief drives a Chevy Traverse, the deputy drives a GMC terrain, I think. And those are unmarked vehicles. But then, yeah, we have a couple of the Durangos. We have one of the Ford Interceptors, I guess they're called. But yeah, I don't know why we don't have any
I mean, there are
any just straight.
police all over the world driving small sedans.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think it's less prevalent here, certainly in this area, but yeah, other people are certainly driving certainly like in Europe and stuff, they're driving much different cars. Yeah, personally, I feel like that's definitely a bigger conversation to have, how many cars we actually need and what they are. Um,
Well,
you know,
we had the replacement every 7 years conversation with the chief earlier, a couple years ago, whatever. That all makes sense, and there's, useful life, et cetera. So I didn't want to revisit all that. I just wanted to revisit the baseline of the foundation of the type of vehicles we're using.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the very least you could probably make a case for a couple of, at least one or two sedans. Because a lot of the police work is, maybe they're at a detail or, they're not, it's not always an emergency, reaction in the snow sort of a situation. And so, I think it's worth having that conversation. I know like it's probably going the wrong direction, but a few forces now are like they're moving to like Teslas because there's a push towards electrified vehicles. But most have been hesitant to that just because there's a charging element and things like that. But yeah, I can raise that question to the chief
Sure,
and say,
let's ask him that. And then, Dano, can you remind me, were you part of the master plan work? There was somebody I thought that went to a lot of those
I
meetings.
was seconded to the plan. It was a master plan advisory committee.
Okay. So like there's $150,000 for a couple of plans in here, studies and plans right in the middle of the report. I assume those are ones that are kind of key to being able to move that project forward.
that's the idea. If we could certainly have Kate weigh in on this, but the idea is that if two of the driving principles are economic development and also improving housing, you'd be reaching out to have a group do a study on those two things to work towards meeting
I
those
think I'd want to,
directives.
having sat on that team, I'd want to understand what the next steps are for implementation of the master plan, and how these particular studies fit into that implementation plan. Or, are there 50 studies that need done? Are these the highest priority, most urgent studies to implement the plan? Like, what are the next steps on implementing the plan and what needs done first with the highest ROI?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And yeah, and I think like at a high level, if I looked at it, because if you read the documentation that comes with these two studies, they would like to sort of move forward with the downtown vibrancy study, as soon as the economic development study ends. And I'm sure that, the thought behind that is, to kind of keep moving the ball downfield with the master plan overall. But I could certainly see a case where, you say, well, let's do the first one and see where we're at and what comes out of that. And then, make this a little more iterative or something and not, do 100 up front and not 50. But yeah, I think, it would be interesting to hear, Dano, how many studies? I mean, how many $100,000 studies are we looking at here? Like in theory, or are these the two big ones out of the gate, or are there 6 or 7 more of these over the next 10 years?
Yeah, there was just a lot of discussion around who's responsible for implementing the plan, and ultimately it's a select board, but it's also I guess the planning committee that owns the plan, and
Yeah,
who does the
land use.
implementation plan within the bigger plan. And that's not super clear. So I think before we start spending money on additional studies, we should understand what the overall implementation plan is.
It's an interesting point because if there's going to be plan after plan, it might be something we'd want to put in that scope of letting, the fourth bucket of things we talked to the citizens about in April, which is kind of like future material costs coming their way, right? We've got this master plan that assumes, $100,000 plans, each year for the next 3 or 4 years or something.
Gotcha. Yeah, I can reach out to Kate Moore, and it could be that, I'm sure she's always, willing to talk, so we could, bring her in, or we could, I think maybe even a summary email or something to us could be helpful. But yeah, I think you're right. I mean, in that last paragraph of the report where we're mentioning big ticket items, it's certainly relevant to say that there's, $600,000 worth of studies hanging out there too.
Or staff that need hired, or different things that need done to implement the plan.
Yeah, I believe the land use department has been built out in part to ensure we can implement the master plan. And certainly Kate and Margaret are, well equipped to do that. I don't know if there's more an idea for more staffing. I think it's not more staffing, it's these studies that would be the additional costs. But yeah, let me talk to Kate and find out a little bit more about that. Trying to think of.
All right, so Dan, before you drop off, I'm just looking at the agenda. We've talked about the Cutler School, the operating budget. We've got the capital budget on here. The item after that is kind of talking about all these impacts on future tax bills, which we also covered. So I think we've covered all the things that are scheduled there. Before you drop out, I wanted to let everybody know, I've been talking to Jeff and emails coming from Steve. It looks like the town manager is going to be looking together, put some sort of document, hopefully a little simple document that kind of helps everybody in all these committees and um, projects to kind of understand a little bit more about how it gets kind of confusing for residents when we stand up to say something in a public forum, whether we are representing the opinion of the committee that we're on or our own kind of personal opinion, and a few other sort of items like that I guess the select board has been noting has been kind of happening a lot because a lot of these committee positions have been open, and there are a lot of new folks on board. So I think we're trying to go through an education path to help folks with that. No idea when the timing is on that, but that's an email that I saw come through, and just want to let you guys hear it from me first.
All right.
Finn, are people going to be attending the land acquisition disposition training thing that was advertised this past week? Because the question was raised about whether we might have a quorum there.
And I didn't realize we had seen it internally. I didn't realize it went out to everyone. So yeah, if we think it's possible, I can always post a meeting.
And I'm looking at the Wenham calendar on the website. I'm not seeing that one listed there yet. But I'm going to be out of pocket all of next week. So if it's next week, it's
It's March 5th, actually, right? Is that the one you're talking about, Bob?
I think so.
Yeah, and so I didn't realize it
wrote
went
the
out
date
to.
down.
Yeah, I mean, we'll be at least a few of us in my office will be at it. But yeah, if you think a few of the FinCom members will be attending, we can certainly post a meeting, just saying that we may have 3 members there.
okay. Seems possible as we get closer. So we'll keep that on our radar. All right. Let's see. Are there folks on the call beside that have things they want to talk about past Dano dropping it in a minute or two? Or do we feel like we have had this meeting run its course?
When's our next meeting?
So it was on that schedule, but I don't think I did a great job of making it known. But I know the select board would like to have the FinCom at their next meeting on Tuesday to sort of give a progress update of where we are with the budget. I know Finn's going to be out. I can certainly go and provide input on your behalf, but I think they want to make sure that it's clear the FinCom's been invited and to participate jointly in that meeting. And so with Finn out, we could certainly still have a quorum, but I'm not sure if folks are available for that. And then certainly we probably need another just regular operational meeting for us to maybe dig deeper into the budget and things, because we're getting close to the end on that. So, probably another meeting on Wednesday if we can make it work. I know Finn won't be here. And then, I'd post us for Tuesday as a joint meeting with the select board. And, if we have a quorum, we have a quorum. If we don't, we can, I'm, like I say, I'm happy to put forth everybody's thoughts to the select board.
That would make sense to me.
Hmm.
And then I'd be, making sure I've got plenty of time to do any sort of final voting on what you guys discuss next Wednesday, the following week when I am around.
And if we are going to wrap up the meeting for tonight, is there any, so we wanted more information on the studies and we'd like to talk a little bit more about potential types of vehicles. Were there any other capital items that sort of stood out to folks as something they might be opposed to at a general level?
Sorry, Finn, when you said next Wednesday, did you mean the 19th or did you mean the 26th?
I think we'll need to do both, but
Okay.
I won't be able to do the 19th.
And what time are we going to meet on the 19th?
Leave it up to folks on
Typically
the
we
call.
do
7 people that are actually going to attend. Maybe you guys let me know when you're going to make it.
No, I mean, I can do it. I just didn't, I wasn't sure.
7's good for me on the 19th, and I'll plan to attend the select board meeting on the 18th, but happy to not speak a whole lot and let Jeff carry the day. So
That's always dangerous.
I'm gonna
Okay.
jump, you guys. Thanks.
All right,
Thanks,
thanks, Dana.
Dana.
Okay, bye.
Right.
How was seven for everybody else on Wednesday?
Sounds good.
That works for me.
Great.
Okay, so we'll do 7 p.m. and 7 p.m. typically works for David as well. So, okay, so I'll move forward with that. Those postings, and actually I think I have to get those posted earlier because Monday is a holiday. Yeah, and then just back on the capital, did anybody have anything that was really sticking out to them besides the studies and the cruiser?
I seem to remember the electric mower was on the list last year.
Yeah, and so last year it got deferred. And in part, what Rich had said was, he could get an extra year out of the mower that they had last year. It's definitely much closer to useful life now. And I think one of the hangups on that last year was it was the electric mower versus the more traditional gas powered. And we had sort of less feedback on how those were working out for DPWs, across the state, and talking to Rich. He's gotten some pretty good feedback from various other DPWs that have put some of these bigger electric mowers into the rotation, and they seem to be working out fine. But I believe the name of the committee is escaping me right now, but there is sort of a committee that's focused on green initiatives for the town. And that is one of the, directives is trying to move to, more electrified vehicles, equipment, things like that. And I think this was sort of the first, stab at that. And so in talking to Rich, if he had to, he could wait another year in a pinch, but ideally I'd say he's ready to, get a replacement mower into the mix here.
Okay, and what's the timing to figure out when you're going to need to use or can release the big $500,000 HVAC placeholder?
So I believe what we're hearing is maybe 2 or 3 weeks on that grant. So the hope is it's in there as a placeholder, and that grant is going to come through for us. But the timing isn't working out great, because I think we will be right against it. We could be potentially pulling that out of the mix, at the last minute before the booklet goes out. Would be the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is it's we don't get final word on the grant until a week after the book goes out. But yeah, I'll stay, Steve will keep me posted on that. And obviously, all of us here in the building would love to take that big red item off there. And it makes a huge difference on the bottom line number, to be sure.
Frees up $500,000 that we could be, messing around with in our either the tax rate immediately or putting into some of these reserves.
Yeah, I mean, it's nearly 40% of the capital request for the year when you think about it.
Okay.
But we'll keep you posted on that. Okay, well, what I'll do is I'm going to, some of my notes are to, I'll keep in mind that I have to potentially post a meeting for the 5th of March. I'll get meetings posted for the 18th and the 19th. I'm going to get some more information from Kate on sort of just the general implementation strategies for the master plan and general thoughts about, are these the two main, is it just $150,000 for these studies up front and then it's pretty small, from here on out, or are there, multiple expensive studies to come? I'm going to send around an updated version of the spreadsheet I sent for the budget, which will have the potential cuts listed in it. It will also have I'm going to work in some additional formulas and dollar changes, like I was walking through with Dano there, to hopefully provide folks a little bit more information. But yeah, then I just asked that, folks, take a look at things. I did add tabs for each department now, just so you, instead of updating the drop down, you can just go to a various department and look at it directly and see their data. But take a look and see where you might have some questions. And then I will work on making sure we've got Bob's comparables, up and running and ready to be probably distributed ahead of our next meeting, so that folks can get a chance to look at them and then discuss them in a bit more detail next time around.
All right, makes sense. All right, so I'm going to see if unless there's any public comment, I'm going to see if we can move to close the meeting. So not hearing any people, members of the public raise their hand, we'll entertain a motion to close the meeting.
So moved.
So that's from Jared. Looking for a second. I saw Bob's hand up, and so that's all right. No more discussion. All right, not hearing any, so we'll move to a vote. Finn, aye.
Aye.
All right, we got 3 members saying aye. Don't think there's anybody else here that's a member to vote against or abstain, so 3-0. So we'll close the meeting.
All right, thanks, gentlemen.
Thanks, guys.
8:39. Thanks so
All right,
much, guys. Appreciate
have a
your
good
time.
trip.
Take care.
Bye,
All right,
guys.
see ya.